So we're on nearly 7 months since the first lockdown. Working from home is urged, new restrictions coming. So do email me for any further information or send me stuff that you want to go in. A number of people are doing that. Do try and get it in before Sunday because it fills up. Okay, I'm following the usual thing. I haven't really got a general theme from what's been happening last week. I've got new pieces to read, the consultations you have to fill in, and developments in the last week in the UK and London, and weekly rolling slides on diversity, delay, and also quickly mention the past articles to read and your special subvertising car adverts from the 1990s. Okay, you must do this. Done a lot of work on getting this conference together. Do go to that link to register for our first of 2 webinars run by Road Danger Reduction Forum and Road Peace on reducing road danger, empowering local communities. First one kicks off on Thursday. It's got myself after Jenny Jones introduces it, welcomes you rather. Then it's Andy Cox, former superintendent at the Met, on enforcement and reducing road danger in London. Kiara Lee, who lost her husband in a road crash, talking about dash cam footage. Then a lot of stuff on third-party reporting, bike camera lights, dash cams, and the legendary cycling Mikey. And then the week after, we've got a lot of stuff on community involvement, and I shall be reminding you next week. Do try and do that. We were going to have the conference in April, and it's now become webinars. And Brian knows where you live, so get in there if you're not already registered. And if you are registered, do please attend. It's at 4 o'clock for an hour and a half. Right, big piece of news here. Is Grant Shapps backtracking, or is he just covering his back? Carlton Reid did an article on this, and it's about the letter he sent to local authorities, which isn't on the department's website, but it was sent to the heads of local authorities, so it is in the public domain, and there it is. Right now, he's been talking about nobody should be in doubt about our support for motorists, but we know that already through the £27 billion road building programme, so no news there. Schemes must balance the needs of cyclists and pedestrians. Oh dear, we've heard that before. And he does say here, which is worrying, with the needs of other road users, including motorists and local businesses. Well, the point is, if you provide properly for people walking and cycling, you do meet the needs of local businesses. So that's a bit worrying. The rest of it, he's been saying you shouldn't put in rubbish schemes. Well, we're all agreed with that. So I'm not sure that this is actually a sort of backtracking. He doesn't want to properly support things. My suspicion is he's really just covering his back, saying what we always knew and what we always wanted, which you should only do good stuff and you're not going to get funded otherwise. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Okay, here's an interesting survey, actually from Dave Hill, would you believe? 1/3, this is 2,000 people surveyed, 1/3 said they supported the introduction of low traffic neighborhoods. A further 19% said they'd strongly support them. So it's over half supportive as a whole, only 19% opposing them. At the same time, Londoners believe that LTNs have been ineffective in reducing the number of cars on the road in London. Well, they weren't really supposed to as such. They were supposed to reduce the number of some car journeys. So that's not too bad. High levels of support for the proposition that most central London streets should be made pedestrian only. That's pretty dramatic. A lot of people saying London's unsafe to cycling. There's a lot of people saying public transport should be free at the point of use, but, well, you know, I don't know how relevant that is. A lot of people do tend to think, oh, if public transport is cheaper, all the cars will go away. It's not as simple as that, as Steve Melia has pointed out. Anyway, interesting survey. And here's the government official guidance. You should aim to reduce the number of journeys you make where possible. If you need to travel, we encourage you to walk or cycle, and you can take part in sport and physical activity outdoors, which includes cycling and should include walking as well, I would have thought. Okay, essential consultation on the highway code. The deadline is the 27th. Make sure you've done that. And you can also add on a section at the end if you want to say things about high-vis clothing, cycle helmets, whatever. Do fill in that consultation essential, get all your friends to do it. There's also the white paper on planning, you've got to do that. Bit of news on tightening up the law on mobile phone use in cars. Something on Hackney and low traffic neighborhoods, what's been happening over the last 10 years. A nice bit of work on people overtaking cyclists who will give extra space if a child is on the bicycle or a bicycle trailer. That was helped out by Ian Walker, and he's done the famous work on that, on overtaking people wearing helmets or not wearing helmets. Right, here's a little story from Lincolnshire. Right, now here's the guy who runs Cycle Hoops, and they've got this design which has been out, it's been out for about 15 years. This design here, which is basically 5 cycle stands with a mock-up of the shape of a car. The point being, this is the amount of space which a car takes up, which this bloke seems to have understood. Look at his hands, very intelligent. And you can get 10 bicycles in it. So it's making that point. And one was put in this place in Lincolnshire, and the locals said, oh, we don't want it because it takes up the space of a car. And they asked a local business, who said, I can't park my car there. So they've taken it out, put it somewhere else, and they've just missed the whole point. Oh yes, in Oxfordshire, Councillor Bartington has said she's stood down a cycling champion because she can't get anything through in Oxfordshire. And the head honcho councillor for environment, planning, highways, whatever, has said, oh, thank you, I know it's been very difficult, but do take care and everything. And this is the same guy who's said when someone abuses cyclists, well, put in a way, people would complain if I said the same thing. And everybody's being justifiably getting annoyed about him, because he then says, who knew that as the weather got worse, all those temporary measures wouldn't get used? Cycling went up during lockdown because people had time on their hands, now they're back to work, they need their cars. This was obvious months ago. So it's the usual things, all those temporary measures, well, not very many, wouldn't get used. Yes, they did. Time on their hands, no, they were still working. Their cars, a lot of people don't have cars. And anyway, do go to his tweets to see all the justifiably angry responses to him. Oxfordshire, yeah, pretty terrible. In Hackney, the wonderful Councillor John Burke, you should follow Councillor John Burke. Here's he talking about how low traffic neighbourhoods consult with the emergency services. We had a session on this last week. Private Eye has said that Ealing hasn't consulted with the emergency services. My information is they do. Anyway, Councillor Burke talking about how emergency services are consulted with, and in Enfield Council also talking about how they consult with London Ambulance Service, Metropolitan Police and the Fire Service. Good news from Cambridge, a planning refusal. Application of a further development around Cambridge Station was refused because the quality and safety of cycling infrastructure is not commensurate with the leading cycling city. It doesn't meet local transport note 120, and it doesn't safeguard for a future major cycle route. So that's good. Good news. Okay, but a bad news. The Alliance of British Drivers was invited to give advice and evidence to the Parliamentary Select Committee on Young Drivers, which is, you know, you can think of your analogies. Why do I point this out? Because I think it's important that we don't just say, let's look at things which are supposed to be in support of active travel and sustainable travel. I think we actually need to look at what the opposition is getting up to, because they will be doing a lot of stuff. And we need to keep an eye on that. We've got limited resources, but we should, in my opinion. Okay, here's the diversity page. The new developments in red. Last week on this webinar, we were still at about 70% male, 30% female. News, if you're disabled, contact Transport for All, beg your pardon. They say what they're busy doing some in-depth research into the impacts, good and bad, of LTNs on disabled people. If you identify as disabled, all impairment groups, and you're a resident in or close to a low traffic neighbourhood, please email katie@transportforall.org.uk. The delay slide. Oh dear, it is now 6 months plus since lockdown. And this is Alex's tweet. 80% of the government's announced £225 million for walking and cycling is still just a number. Where is the remaining 180 million going? And it's the 7th time for Alex's tweet. We have had that letter from SHAPS, and we did hear last week that all the final documents from the Department of Transport have been sent to Downing Street. So that should be happening about now. And we'll have to try and do something, I think, if it doesn't happen by this time next week. Okay, on the ground, it all depends where you live. If you're in Birmingham, right, a lot of stuff sent to me by David Cox. This is Dame Elizabeth Cadbury School. Bollards will have gone in by now. They've got LTNs in 5 suburbs in various states of implementation and experimentation. Pop-up cycle lanes, bus lane, etc., etc., etc. Various things in Birmingham. Only one temporary pop-up lane has actually been removed thus far, allegedly for safety reasons, but largely political in his view. So his view is that Birmingham was well prepared with the relevant plans. We had a look at their emergency active travel plan way back in early summer. The officers have been well trained and prepared, and he reckons they've got political support. Remember, it always comes down to willingness. Active LTN campaigns and residents groups are key in supporting the council and moderating opposition, and they have them. Our Bourneville, and push bikes have so far organised 3 Zoom sessions to enable mutual support on methods for building a network, countering opposition, coping with flak and trolls, talking to businesses, etc. This is something that the council sent out the other day. Great to see completion of the new modal filters along Howard Road, but not great to see this. Yes, this is illegal, and anyone caught doing this will can be fined. I don't know if they have cameras there, how they're doing it, but they said they're exploring further measures needed to prevent this. Oh dear, yes, this is in Blackburn with Darwen. Now the story behind this is the local authority decided to put in a continuous white line down the side, and someone in the cycling group said, oh, well, can you stick a cycle logo in it? So they said yes. And this is, as you know, this is really what you should not do. And a lot of it comes down to the thing that people interested in shared space, risk compensation, etc., have been saying for ages, that continuous white lines down the side of the road are there in ways which enable motorists to concentrate less. If it hadn't been there in the first place, it would have been better. That's the problem. If you can't get a separate segregated cycle lane there. And that therefore is bad. Motorists will be saying you shouldn't be there on the carriageway, you should be there in with the leads. Very bad. Bradford, there's a report here by Emma Young from Bradford Cycling Campaign. There's one good lane, which I showed you last week, one bit of paint on the pavement, for goodness sake, one closure which might be good, some city centre stuff. She was kind of a bit hopeful. I would be less so. Don't forget, Bradford has the lowest modal share of cycling in the UK. Bath prospected 20-mile-an-hour limits. North Tyneside, oh dear, they're going to remove the very successful and hugely popular Sunrays cycleway that's out on the coast. That's very sad. There's a petition to oppose cycle lane removal in Sefton. West Sussex, I'll repeat this again, they've got these photos up of the people of Upper Shoreham Road, showing all the people who are making journeys by bike. A lot of good work there. Right, now, the bad guys, Northants. This is my understanding, Northamptonshire, from our spy there. They've done hardly anything for tranche 1. Bus lane hours have been increased but not policed. Half-baked wand schemes, one now having the wands removed because residents complained. Pavements expanded by cordoning off parking bays, often replaced by cars on the footway itself, and little, if any, enforcement. One school street done under duress, £465 a day in operation costs, and it's still not secure. They've reneged on their agreement to monitor the effects and have now told the parents to do it. They really do seem to be a kind of perfect example of doing things which are kind of bound to fail and be hopeless, so that they won't get any money from government for tranche 2. And I would personally like to see the government saying, well, we're going to stop supporting you elsewhere if you're just not obeying our instructions to reallocate road space. Anyway, my view. The tranche 2 bid, which was wildly overbidding, was withdrawn because residents don't like it. Okay, they're the bad guys. Oh yeah, the LSWIP's being consulted on with commitment to not adhere to LTN 120. Bad news, this is the filtered area in Bournemouth and Poole 11 Avenue, and it's gone now or is about to go, so that's a shame. Aha, London. Right, so you might have seen stuff about negotiations over the funding of Transport for London. Now, this is interesting because, as you know, there's an election in May, and it looks like the government is telling the mayor to do stuff which is radical, but might make him very unpopular. Although, of course, he won't be able to get stuff in, certainly road pricing schemes, before May. So we don't know what's going to happen. And the Sean Bailey seems to be singing from a different hymn sheet than Conservatives, certainly in terms of road-based reallocation at the centre of government. And they've been arguing that there should be cuts of free public transport for children and old age pensioners, extension of the congestion charge throughout inner London, and fare increases on public transport. Now, there are interesting problems here. These are my views on the congestion charge. Heidi Alexander and others have said, oh, you can't really charge people 15 quid in inner London. Well, okay, let's have it at, say, 10 quid in London. And also, you really should be putting in congestion charging in outer London, because that's where there's more congestion and you need the revenue, and you'd get it from something like 8 quid in outer London. Ideally, you should have smart roader user charging, but this is what's being flagged up. Personally, I'd like to see it. And there are other problems with the whole free transport thing. If you make it means tested for older people, it costs a lot of money, and disabled elderly people with learning difficulties tend to be more likely to not fill out the relevant forms, particularly online. Okay, this has happened in Lambeth and Brent and Harrow. Very important, say thank you to people when they do good stuff. This deputation giving this big thank you to the mayor happened last week. It's also happening in Harrow and Brent. And it's composed of neighbourhood groups that do graphics like this. This is Liverpool, Streatham Wells, with various vox pops saying, you know, it's so much better since we had the low traffic neighbourhood in. So that's good. In Brent, the officers haven't really been getting their act together. They've spent the money, annoyed residents, and aren't even properly implementing things. They really have taken a lot of time getting their act together, and they haven't done stuff properly. Bit of a shambles. And so a lot of residents in Brent, like me, are going to have to write to councillors saying, please try and do it, support it, but we accept it has to be done properly. That's what's necessary. This is in Hackney, bit of vandalism again, and Councillor Burke has said we'll be forced to implement lockable bollards, and it will have some implications for people we want to let through the modal filters, such as emergency services. It's clear that people destroying public property only care about themselves. Right, the city is proposing next phase of Bank Junction works to improve pedestrian space and priority. This may include closing, restricting some arms to motorised vehicles. You may, if you look at local transport today, they talk about the boroughs that haven't had funding from TfL, and City are actually in there. In fact, they've been doing a load of stuff off their own back right from the beginning. But City, of course, are, you know, sort of unusual circumstances. Westminster is going to trial a low traffic neighbourhood off the Edgware Road, bit of a surprise there. And this is in Merton. Do look at the sign there. I'm not sure that's particularly necessary. Could go in. Interesting, nice chunky orcas, cylinder wand on top of it. That line is hopefully by now, it's a unbroken solid white line, and according to TfL guidelines, it will have to go just on the outside, but hopefully that's a work in progress. Oh dear, Redbridge, oh dear. This is a message from the leader of Redbridge Council. Although we have received some positive comments and significant support for the scheme's principles, including reducing air pollution, making our roads safer, response has been to ask us to reverse the changes. And we did want to reduce traffic in and around residential areas and stop rat running. While this has been successful, some people have complained, so we've chickened out. Very depressing. I tweeted to them saying, you're very near London Borough of Hackney, do have a word with Councillor Burke. This is good by comparison. Hounslow have got a nice list. This is the whole of Hounslow. And as you can see, they're planning low traffic neighbourhoods throughout the borough. There's your link to go to it. So that's basically it. Here's your additions to the stuff that you have to read. You can go onto this, if you go into the archive, you can get this slide out and go onto all those campaigns and reading and lists of resources, etc. Do not forget the Highway Code review consultation document, the hit and run petition, planning for the future, parking you should have already done. Right, since you've been good boys and girls, here's some car adverts amended in the 1990s. Brenda Pesch scanned some photographs. These are campaigns that were happening in the mid-90s around Reclaim the Streets. Also, people were interested in the sexism. Here was an advert for the Vauxhall Corsa. Christie proves no rival beats the Corsa for interior space. Illustrated by dropping cement into it, which was a bit weird. So that was amended with Christie proves no rival beats the Corsa for storing concrete. Nice little anti-pollution mask, a bit of pollution there. Car pornography, no way to advertise. Linda christens the Corsa the greenest car in its class. Looks like a cover-up job to me, thinks Linda. The next one, yeah, Linda christens the Corsa the deadliest car in its class, car pornography. And here's Tatiana can't wait to test the Corsa's all-round safety cage. So that was changed to Tatiana can't wait to trash the Corsa all round and go by bike. So there's your car ads advertising for the week, and there's your news. And I might have got stuff wrong, so do tell me what I've got wrong.
Brilliant, thanks, Bob. I think there are a couple of comments in this. I'll bring Roger in on the Shaps letter, as I've been calling it. I nearly spat my tea at the screen when I read it. I won't tell you when. Roger, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, thanks, Brian. Roger Geffron from Cycling UK. I must say I'm more concerned about the Shaps letter than Bob seems to be. I think that this is sending very mixed messages to councillors who are, many of whom are very cautious about doing this stuff. All of the stuff that the government was sending out earlier this year, saying to local authorities, you must meaningfully reallocate road space if you want your emergency active travel funds. You know, lots of really, and then local transport note 120 coming out saying if you're not following this, you're not going to get funding. And instead of saying you must meaningfully reallocate road space, Shaps is now saying you must consider the needs of businesses and motorists. If I were back in one of my previous jobs working as a local authority policy officer, I wouldn't know what to do. I would be feeling very cautious about advising my councillors to put in kind of bold schemes now. Are they what you have to do to get funded, or are you going to not get funding because if you haven't considered the need of motorists, it's really unclear what gets you funded now. So I mean, I think that we have got to push for some clarification of what Grant Shapps has said, because otherwise this is going to have a very similar effect to what happened with speed cameras 15 years ago, where again a minority, certain sections of the media whipped up opposition to speed cameras as if this was a populist revolt against a safety measure. And in fact, public support for speed cameras was never fell below about 75%. What that does, though, when Shapps writes letters like this, is it emboldens the people who are in that sort of 15% minority who think that they are majority. It reinforces their perception that they're majority, so it emboldens them to carry on with the opposition. It strengthens it. And I think that's going to make it harder for local authorities to now face this down and sort of say, no, look, this is actually not majority opinion, and it is what the government was encouraging us to do. The next message would, we need some clarity from the government that they still believe in gear change and LPN 120, and that needs to be as visible and public as letters in the Sunday Telegraph.
Hi everyone, and thanks for all the bants on the chat. I think I've woken up Siri. I've got about 6 computers and 2 phones here, so it's the home office is living the dream here. I'm the new chief exec at Living Streets. You will know Stephen Edwards and other of my directors, and I'm sure you all knew Joe Irvin. I took over in September. I've been in post now about 6 or 7 weeks, so you've probably all forgotten more about low transport neighbourhoods and walking and cycling than I can ever possibly hope to learn. But I come at a very interesting time and really keen to share some of my thoughts and experience with you today. Let me see if I can make this thing work. If I can't, I'll just... yeah. So I wanted to talk about COVID because we're back in it, aren't we? Not that we ever left it. And talk about how we've experienced COVID. So there you see, it's revealed inequalities, particularly amongst diverse ethnic, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. But it's also showed us just how lonely people are. And you've got a photo there of a guy down in the New Forest whose wife died, who put this sign in his window. And I think there's something really profound for us in this picture, which is about more cars equals fewer friends. And I think the more we keep saying that, the better it is for all of our campaigns. The more cars you have in your street, the fewer friends you have, the unfriendlier the neighborhood. The research came out in California 30 years ago. A smaller study in Bristol a few years back found exactly the same effect. So when we talk about, I'm very conscious that we talk about reallocating road space. What I think we ought to be saying is making nicer communities, enabling people to have more social contact, preventing Alzheimer's, tackling loneliness. I talk about the twin epidemics of obesity and loneliness. And I want to add on to that the third epidemic of unemployment, because if you can't get around, you can't get up in and on in life. So for me, if you can't get on the bus and you don't have the money for a car and you live in one of the local pit villages in Wakefield, you won't go to college. So you will stay having left school at 16 in some cases, 18 others, 14 in some cases, and you will never get on. You will never get a job. And I think the lack of physical mobility is a real problem. And I think there's things that we need to think about that I'm very keen to talk about. We have looked at the Emergency Active Travel Fund. We want to make sure that we're tackling inequalities, having integrated and sustainable journeys, and we really want to make sure that we have better streets. So we've just launched our new 5-year strategy. Go and have a look. We've got mystery voiceover. Does anybody know who our voiceover artist was? Anyone recognize it? Put it in the chat. He's a very famous actor. But anyway, we have a focus on 3 things: getting people to choose walking, making sure that our streets are accessible to everyone, and making our streets better for everybody. I'm sure things we can all agree with there. We are going to be much more bold and ambitious on the public investment case for walking, making sure that walking is at the top of the travel hierarchy. So again, the pavement parking consultation, the highways code consultation, putting the most vulnerable users, road users first. And also, I think we're long past time for a sort of default urban 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. And just, I put in the chat, I was out with Andrew Smith from the Westminster Council this week, and he was been pleasantly surprised by the amount of support that their new 20-mile-an-hour zone had got. And I said, well, that's because your residents have gone to Camden, literally across the street from themselves, enjoyed not being mowed down by cars, and are quite pleased about having that experience outside their own front doors. And I think there is something about building out from where we are. And I think one of the weaknesses of the EATF is that we tried to build the same stuff everywhere instantly. And it's a bit like I remember 20, oh God, it's many years, 23 years ago, as a young councillor in Islington, introducing the first control parking zone, and the residents essentially saying this was the end of the world as they knew it. So there's no novelty in councillors being shouted at by residents and the silent majority not having their voice heard. But we need to get everyone up to the level of bolshiness of John Burke in Hackney and a few other brave souls, and give them comfort that they are doing the right thing. And I think in some areas, perhaps where officers are less comfortable or less experienced at this, or in areas where there's a very vocal taxi or driver lobby, we are vulnerable. Our movement is vulnerable to pushback and councillors adopting the easy way rather than doing what's right. So yeah, we want to step up, we want to grow, we want to showcase our products and services. There's Fran Mazzullo, fabulous lady who works with us. Put the park into parking. Inequalities, interesting in the chat talking about Bradford, a city I know well, Leeds, a city I know well, absolutely ghastly for cycling. I always said I was, much rather cycle in London than in Wakefield, and people could never understand that. And it's because there's segregated cycle space and 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And in Wakefield, only people who couldn't afford a car would drive, and they would cycle, and they would be cycling along dual carriageways. And I lost count of the number of cyclist deaths that happened, usually of men early in the morning or late at night, going to their kind of distribution warehouse along the A650 and being killed by speeding cars going along at 40 miles an hour that just didn't see them. It was a particular pattern that really bothered me, that people on low incomes who perhaps had been even banned from driving were trying to keep their job, trying to cycle, no buses, so no physical mobility, no social mobility, and were killed in the course of getting to work. That was always something that really bothered me. Pavement parking, electric vehicle charging points are coming on. We've got the A boards, we've got pavement parking, all sorts of issues for us to deal with. And I think really trying to get the design notes changed so that we have space for walking is a really important goal. So we've had the pop-up pavements across the country. Some of them will be coming out. And I think what's really exciting is the school streets. And I just think going to a Hackney school street and seeing it closed, I've got one around the corner from me in Islington, and looking at the fact there is complete silence and relaxation on the drop off to school, that was something that I never experienced as a parent. I was always walking up, battling through traffic, kids on bikes, kids jogging alongside me, and it was always like the most stressful time of the day. After that, going into the House of Commons and asking a Prime Minister's question was frankly a piece of cake and a walk in a park. So how do we get that tranquility, and how are we selling that lack of stress? So we talk about school streets and we talk about kids and we talk about air pollution. We don't talk about the fact that your blood pressure rises with the noise of traffic and aviation. We don't talk about the fact that if cycling and walking were drugs, you know, every single person in the country would be on them. We don't talk about that. And I think there's a piece missing there, which is because we're basically asking traffic engineers to deliver health outcomes, and I think we need to work out how we blend those messages, and I think it is really challenging in the middle of a public health crisis. We've just had Walk to School Week, 300,000 pupils having their lovely walk, cycle or scoot to school. We also had a walk with the Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, who I think is a firm supporter on this, and we have our Walk to School programme. If you are in Bradford, if you're in West Yorkshire, West Midlands, South Yorkshire, Liverpool City region, we are able now to expand our programme in your area. So if you have local schools that you think would like to walk with us and participate in that programme at primary schools, do please email me at mary.creagh@livingstreets.org.uk. We have got funding and we will be reaching out to schools in those areas. So if you've got one that's hot to trot, or that is particularly suffering from transport related issues and there's a real sort of problem outside the school, do get in touch with us, and we will go in and talk to the head teacher there. Again, very, you know, lots going on in schools at the moment, trying to keep their staff healthy, trying to keep their kids healthy, trying to keep the building safe. But it is an excellent programme, and it does have real you know, mental health, air pollution and congestion benefits. So we also talk about work through our streets network, giving voice to the people that often don't get heard. And one of the things I would just say about this sort of Twitter wars is always check the profile of the person that you're working with. I did some work on this during the Brexit referendum, surprisingly, which was another very divisive moment in our country's history. And you realise that the Russian troll factories are setting up sock puppet accounts to deliberately cause division. And by engaging with them, you get them more followers, because all the you know, the people that are on their side then follow them and give them legitimacy. And I would just go in, there are a few warning signs, like did they open their account in September 2020? Have they got 3 followers? Is one of their followers somebody in Richmond, Virginia, who wants to make America great again? If they are, the chances are that they're not a real person, and you should report them as a fake account to Twitter. Report, because actually one of the battles we've got to get better at winning is the social media battle. And I think people, and I know this from my own colleagues in the House of Commons, you know, people engaging all night and having rows with people, that, you know, sometimes you can see little linguistic tells that they're not actually native English speakers. They're pretending to, and there'll be some sort of language giveaways that show that they are it's either computer generated or somebody who's you know, sitting in St. Petersburg in a troll factory. So just think about that. I really strongly recommend that, because I've seen lots of good people get sucked into wars with bots, and that's what they want. So before you engage, check out who you're talking to, and I always report them, because if you don't report them to Twitter, they will never get taken down, and they'll be out there, and they're a generator of negative comments, and they're one of the things that is making politicians like Grant Shapps get nervous, and the councillors get really nervous ahead of a big election year. So yes, we know that people want to see changes through the highway code. People are worried about congestion being back, and it's almost like we've had our dress rehearsal for climate change, and yet we are not learning any of the lessons for it. And I think also there's a massive climate piece in what we do that is really important. We are going to need to get rid of 20% of cars, and even with electric vehicles. So electric vehicles are not the answer, they're a part of the answer, but public transport is the answer, because every time you go on public transport, you are building in a walking journey or a cycling journey, and that active travel piece is happening. So the silent majority is on our side. How do we give them voice? And I think the hospitality piece is very important in this as well, because we're reallocating road space. Well, let's reallocate it to some nice tables so we can sit outside and meet our friends before the next 6 months are over. You are still allowed to do that, I think, in tier 2 areas. I'm not sure if you can do it in tier 3, but the fact that when roads close, tables come out and people can meet each other and people can go to work is a really important part of this. We tend to only listen to the businesses who say, Mrs. Miggins has got to be able to park right outside my shop. What we haven't listened to or amplified is the businesses who said, actually, I can put 10 tables outside. That helps me keep 4 people in work. And we do know that where there's a better neighbourhood, spend in local shops goes up in some areas by up to 30%. We have been doing blogs during lockdown, walking from home, working from home. So we're looking at doing a lot more content digitally. Interested to talk to you about that. The Try 20, rain or shine. Amazed how many people seem to think that a bit of rain is a reason not to get on their bike or to go out for a walk with the children. And we had our Walk This May poster. You might want to download it. And if you're in a workplace, put it in your workplace. If you're in a if you're at home, put it on the fridge and tick it off as a family challenge. There's some lovely ideas in there. My favorite is walking for more than 10 minutes to go and get a sandwich from the office. So we've done lots of street reviews. We've been involved in some of the big Ilford master planning, and we are thinking constantly about how we engage the message to reach non-traditional communities who aren't sitting on calls like this. So we're all about keeping it inclusive, and our hashtag Walk With Us is basically our little rallying call. And I'll stop there and have a little look at the chat and see if there's anything in there.
Yeah, we'll kind of feed things through. That was brilliant, Mary. Cheers for that. Very inspirational. I wrote down a couple of quotes there. We're loving it, and definitely my timeline's been afire with like fake accounts and everybody responding to them this week. So definitely a big win there. So has anybody got a question for Mary while we've got her?
I can see Puddles beat soft play zones any day. That's right. But can I just say about soft play zones?
Sure. Then I'll bring Claire in, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say about soft play zones. My friend was an environmental health specialist, and she said the amount of urine that was on those ball pits was absolutely disgusting. So stay out of the soft play zones, people. I know there's a pandemic on as well, but there's an awful lot of little kids weeing in their pants with excitement. So just thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, I've got 2 little kids who like weeing everywhere as well. Claire, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi Mary, I'm Claire and I'm based in Manchester and I'm part of a group called Walk Ride Greater Manchester, grassroots campaigning. In your strategy, and you mentioned it, I was really pleased to see that Living Streets say you're going to be more vocal, and I think Living Streets at the moment like represent the sort of more of the placemaking benefits of walking and cycling that you were talking about, more frankly than some of the other groups, and everybody is trying to move into talking more about the community benefits, clean air, etc. But I think to me Living Streets represents that more. But I just feel like there's not enough. If we're gonna be more vocal, then there's a real need to make that voice bigger by working with the other people in the sector. And I know there was the Walking and Cycling Alliance, but that's been fairly quiet for the last year. And I wonder about, you know, teaming up more with health and urban planners. And it seems to me that there's too many small voices here, no offence to Living Streets. And we need the paid organisations to do more, frankly, to make that voice bigger and louder.
That's a very good challenge, Claire. And I know Walking and Cycling Manchester does great work. I accidentally stumbled on their cycle path when I went up there to see Usdaw a few months back, probably about a year ago now. And it's a fair challenge. Most of our income comes from the Department of Transport to deliver walking programmes with schools. So that's our I think perhaps reluctance, hesitancy, dare I say it, in the past. But I also think we need to be talking to MPs. So we sent our walk to school packs out to MPs and said, if you've got local schools that want this, we'll send it to them, you know, and quite a few of them came back and were like, oh, this is really good. So I think there's tips and techniques that I bring from obviously a campaigning background. You're right, we are less than the sum of our parts. Some, you know, Walking and Cycling Alliance, there's cycling groups in there, Roger's on the call. We have our own asks, and so, you know, the cyclists want this and we want that, and we all want fewer cars. And I think perhaps there's a bit of institutional, perhaps we need to look at those sort of removing some of those institutional barriers so that we do perhaps more joint statements. But there is also about the thing about, we've not been traditionally a membership organisation. We've had members, but they've not been activists. And so what we're looking at now is moving to a much more sort of a paid model of membership in order to finance that kind of that speaking out part of our work. Because at the moment we've got the Department for Transport financing our activity on the ground. There's a certain amount of you know, that goes back into the central charity, and I think looking very hard at that is something that I've been very keen on doing. So I think you will be hearing more from us on that as we go forward.
Okay, anybody else got a question? We've got Mary. I think Ruth, did you have a question, or was it on the previous topic? Go on, Dave, did you want to speak?
Yeah.
So go on, Ruth. Yeah, Ruth.
It was actually in response to Rob Davis, but for Mary as well. Just so you know, Kew Road, this is very London centric, but Kew Road had a fantastic cycle path put in very early on. They removed all the car parking along Kew Gardens, which they're probably going to do anyway for when Brentford football opens with the rugby and everything. But Greg Hands has jumped in, as he might, and done a letter and a petition asking everybody in Kew and everyone along there to write saying that they want parking back along that road and to get rid of the cycle route because it's in the way, not enough people are using it, all that kind of usual stuff. So I feel that the Shapps letter does give him the ammunition to be doing that. It gives the anti-cycling councillors from Kingston, Richmond, Chiswick to say, well, look, this is what he's saying. And it is a worry to people like me who find it all incredibly safe and fantastic. So that's an alert that anyone who does live along there uses that, please, please, please write, and applaud Alexander Amon of Richmond Council for doing it in the first place. Thank you.
Councillors and politicians, this is my tribe that I know intimately, respond to residents. So in a way, Twitter wars are fine, but what you need is a Facebook account that says, you know, save Kew cycle lane. You get, you do some Facebook advertising, you get some likes from your local community, and every like on Facebook it's like a logarithmic scale. It's worth 10 people because of who they share it with, and you just keep posting up there, and you make it impossible for whoever it is not to listen to you. And you know, these are techniques from political campaigning, and I think we need to get much better at using them. I hate Facebook. It was a horrible place for me when I was an MP. My staff did the account, but I knew how to work it, and I knew that getting likes, once you had about 3,000 or 4,000 likes, you've got everybody in the constituency on your Facebook group, essentially, because of who they will share it out to. And so smart Facebook advertising is something the Conservative Party were much better at it than the Labour Party. I can tell you that. But it's something that I think we can use in local groups to really sort of take a stand on this. We're in an election year, so don't be, and a petition is a great way of collecting data. So you've got the names and addresses of everybody, and if you want to convert names into votes, that's how you do it. It's a classic political campaigning issue. Find a local issue, you know, find people who feel strongly about it, and represent them. The thing is not to get mad, the thing is to get even and find a greater number of people that are signing your petition and writing to whoever it is to make their voices heard. So I think that's the thing. I'm looking on here, Greenpeace, what people saying that, you know, pavement parking is fine. There's quite a lot of stuff coming up in the chat about some of these things.
Can I just say, Mary, though, I mean, for example, Ealing have got 7,000 on their petition against LTNs. The pro voices are not. We know that the antis are more likely to sign a petition than they are to actually write to their council and say, yes, we like it. I cycle everywhere in my local area, and any time I see anyone on a bike, I say, do you like this? Yes, please, can you write to the councillor? People are much more laid back about being positive about things than they are negative. I think so. It's
under threat. So now they've got a negative to campaign against, and you've got to go to every school there as well. So you basically sort of target the schools and get the parents there, because actually, if you've got a kid who's at secondary school or primary school and they're using it for this, you know, to walk or cycle to school, having it taken away is a big deal for those parents. Back to the stress levels, and you know, parents are a mighty force. So it's a question of now you've got something negative to campaign against, which is you're going to lose your street space. It's a numbers game with councillors and MPs, and if there's a petition with 5,000 people, they will look at the addresses, but they will also very much respond to genuine letters as well. So they might look at a petition, but they might also think, oh, I've had 100 letters on this, and that creates a little bit of nervousness. So 100 real letters or emails is also good.
Thank you.
Okay, Roxanne, I was going to bring you next, and then Dave, and then we'll do Mark. That was the plan in my mind. All yours, Roxanne.
Thanks, Brian. Mary, welcome. Great to see you at Living Streets. I'm Roxanne. I'm the Executive Director of CamCycle, Cambridge Cycling Campaign. We've had a number of times people want to start a walking campaign in Cambridge, and I would very, very much like to see that. CamCycle does what we can for walking, and we absolutely believe in the hierarchy of walking before cycling and so on, but I think having that specific group would make such a difference. But they always fall over because generally the people that want to start the groups don't want to use social media, and that's never going to work. But it would just be great if there was a mechanism from Living Streets to help groups. They seem to be in London, but I don't know how we can get something like that happening locally. So you might not have the answer now, but it's on your radar.
Yeah, no, we have a local groups network. We have it's doubled in size thanks to the work of Steve Edwards and his team. We've got about 60 local groups up in Perth. We've got them all over across the country in every nation and region. So it shouldn't be a barrier to you starting something up. The thing I would say about campaign groups is you might have 100 members, only 10 will ever be active. So if you have 50 members, it's a 10% rule. So don't be sad when some people join and want to give you moral support, or they'll make the tea on your, on your campaign day. People join campaigns for different reasons, and people have different things going on in their lives. But what I would say is that you can sign up on our website. We're sort of in the middle of repurposing it, but we are going to get into this individual and groups. We do have the group, so if you do want to set up a group in Cambridge, by all means jump on the website and do that straight away, because we can certainly we've got tools. We've got Holly, who's in the office with me on a daily basis, supporting local groups in their different activities.
Yeah, it's been a few years, so perhaps we need to try again, but we weren't really getting far before. I think I completely know about campaigning groups and how you just sort of get that core group that do most things, but I think we just need that one person who's willing to take on a bit of that leadership role. But if at least if we know there's some support from Living Streets, I can keep directing people.
Yeah,
that way and we can get
do.
it going. Yeah, while I've got the floor, those things about Greenpeace, I agree with Claire. I think we absolutely need to get a campaign that has all the big national groups aligned with us, with the same ask. And having been involved in a previous version of the Walking and Cycling Alliance, we spend too much time bickering about the ask. It doesn't matter what the ask is, because we're probably not going to get it, but what we need is one shared ask, so that we're actually asking for something rather than nothing. So Mary, maybe that's another one for you, is in your new role, can you help to bring those groups together? And I'm also quite peeved that Greenpeace is now getting involved in this space, and they've not actually engaged with any of these organizations either. But it is positive, because if we've got Greenpeace, can we get some big health organizations as well as our transport organizations? I think there's something here we really need to do.
Are Greenpeace getting involved in this space?
Absolutely. I've posted a link in the chat. I'll post it again. They've started a petition about transport, and I've been emailing them and going around in circles trying to find out, where has this come from? Why? Who have you spoken to in any of the other active travel groups? If you don't know anyone, I know people. And then they've also been doing a range of webinars locally, and I think a number of us have spoken at the local Greenpeace webinar. But yeah, there's just something's just not quite working.
I think I think we've had a chat with somebody in their campaigns team. We've had one chat, but I don't think we were aware that that this was going on. So I think maybe we'll go back to them on that. I'm very interested in what Ruth's posted about the road users group. So in the Netherlands, you have the RAC, AA, London site all rolled in. I think that's quite an interesting model, because actually it's, you know, the freight transportation industry doesn't want really to be, you know, knocking people over and putting their big lorries on roads. So it's interesting about whether we can do a kind of, because, you know, you always have the people at the top that say, yeah, we're, you know, and then the people that are their drivers being perhaps less enthusiastic. And I think there's something in that about a whole road users group. Maybe that's a naive and beautiful dream at the moment in the UK.
I think we've got room to go. I'm somewhat skeptical about this Greenpeace petition. It's on their platform. It's getting lots of signatures. They've now got everybody's name and address, but I'd much rather see a petition on the government's website, so it actually makes action happen from the government and all of our national organizations promoting the same petition, rather than everybody having their own individual campaign. Anyway, that's what I'm working on behind the scenes, secret squirreling.
Great.
But anyhow,
very good.
Yeah, I'll bring the next one, but just to mention something that Simon Monk put in a comment, the Climate Safe Streets report that we wrote with them, we were hoping that was a rallying cry, and we're certainly going to push the Mayor of London on that one. Claire, did you want to instantly come back with a point of clarification and see about to speak, or otherwise I'm going to go to Dave?
Well, just to say that I think the other thing is just being more vocal about consultations. I mean, some of us in the local groups would feel like, well, bloody hell, not another one. But the more that the national groups can get out early with, here's the key points, don't have to do templates, but and again, echoing Roxy's point about like what is the key ask. So we've got a gear change, we've got LTM 120, we've got the government putting 2 billion. Actually, what are the Walking and Cycling Alliance groups now asking for? It seems to me it's about delivery, and that's that. Some of your messaging perhaps, you know, needs to move on to what's the ask around delivery, rather than policy and aspiration.
That's a really good point.
I'll just say, yeah, we've got Siors from the Netherlands who's putting a bit of clarification on how awesomely car-centric their system is.
Mary, great to see you in post. It's brilliant, and I've got sort of two different things. One is to talk about local groups. We have a local contact rather than a local group here in Brighton and Hove, and it's something that Cycling UK went through, and Roger will probably be able to talk about this, about the trying to get accredited local groups and make sure that the people who are speaking for Living Streets locally are actually speaking for Living Streets and not just speaking as individuals, because there's been a lot of people, and as I said, Cycling UK, when they were CTC, went through this trauma for a while of people who've been doing the same thing for many years and haven't necessarily said what's online. So I would just say that when the guy at Brighton used to introduce himself at a meeting, he said Living Streets, but really with a pedestrians association, because he'd been there for so long, and all the stuff that you put out, your change of tack before you were there, but he just ignored all that because he had been there for so long, he knew better than what the organization was doing. And there have been some comments about whether there's an anti-cycling message or not. I think, you know, there needs to be some nuance put on and some sort of training done. And as I said, there's a great precedent for how Cycling UK referred to its old style, went through its old style campaigners, some of whom might be here. So I just want to make those points. Speaking as an actual member, paid up member of Living Streets, I should say. My last outing was to the thing in March, my last conference. What I wanted to do was go a bit beyond the Grant Shapps things. I'm probably not supposed to be saying this, so apologies to anyone who's here, but I have on my screen the draft of the network management guidance from DFT, which is the statutory backing up. I can't tell anyone what's in it, but I think that's probably going a bit too far, but it's the statutory backing up of what Grant Shapps' letter is actually saying. So this is the formal bit, you know, ministerial direction as opposed to the letter. And I would say that most of the concerns are not founded on what's in this network management guidance. The network management guidance continues most things, most of the good things that came out in May. This is the thing that came out in May, and it said this will be reviewed in 6 months' time. So I think that the formal thing that goes to councils won't be too bad, but it's the political side. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about from the politician side of things, is people will pick up on the letter, they won't read this technical document. And how can we make sure that the technical document, which isn't as bad in general, it is actually referred to as opposed to the sort of headline grabbing thing in the Telegraph. Although I would just say, having said I won't quote, there is one quote, and it said, you know, it's referring to councils not doing enough consultation. And it says somewhere in the guidance, it says consultation should be much wider than previously and could include local businesses who may want to comment or object. So the DFT doesn't think that any local business might support an active travel measure. They only think local businesses might comment or object. So that's a perspective of the government.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mark. And say hi to my sister when you see her and tell her to keep hoovering.
I didn't want to mention her in case you didn't want to mention her, but yeah, she's part of our group locally. I should just point this out.
Yeah, no, that's great. So yeah, I think, again, it's politics, isn't it? And you know, it's a quiet week in the Telegraph, although it's also quite a good thing to have a headline that isn't COVID related. So there's a whole news agenda management piece going on there, and I've seen the guidance as well, like you, and I'm quite interested in the fact that the digital bit has been missed out. So one of the things that anecdotally is happening is that delivery drivers and people have been buying lots of stuff online, are going down the LTNs and then finding out that they can't get through and they have to come around and it's taking longer. Now, you know, with my former MP hat on, I don't want to make it harder for anyone to earn a living. So I don't want someone who is either a self-employed van driver or working on a piece rate basis for Amazon or DPD to not make enough to feed himself and his family, especially at a time like this where money is so tight and families are really struggling. So why aren't the engineers talking to Google and Waze and all the maps that delivery drivers and people use? And I've got a call into my old friend of mine from Google to try and get this piece up, because I sort of think a lot of, if people know that they have to go a certain way, then that's fine and they will accept it. It's when they go down a place and find it unexpectedly blocked that they get annoyed. And I think that's where the rage comes from. And I think as long as, if you're told to go down the wrong, we all know it as cyclists, you know, oh God, it's taken me down this road and now it's a one-way street and I have to break the law to continue my journey, or I have to go on the footpath, or I have to go round or go back. It's frustrating. So times that by driving a van and earning not very much money. And I can see where people's, you know, frustrations come from. And I think the digital piece is really important in these changes. And I don't think that is happening anywhere in the country, not in London, not in any of the big combined authorities. It's a learning system. Yes, they can, but I don't think the drivers are reporting the changes. And I think possibly that they won't change the maps until the changes are permanent. I don't know how they do it. Lucy says they respond everywhere. So yes, the formal document is in draft. It's not been published yet. And when they publish it, how do we make it exciting and sexy and newsworthy? And the question is, you know, what are we saying about this? Which is, what's the news? about a bit of government document. And that's my challenge back to all of us. What's exciting about this?
I'm helping to write CIHT's response, and I hadn't put, there was nothing in there about digital signing. So I now have to go and change that, because that's and CIHT, Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation, is going to be representing those groups as well. And that's I'm actually going to change it right now and put that in. So thanks.
We fed it back directly to the department, but it's kind of, and then it didn't change. And I'm like, mate, you've got to do this. This is because you shouldn't rely on people being frustrated and reporting it up. You should rely on, it should be done at the planning stage. It should be part of good planning. It's digital. Mobility is now a software service. If I want to go somewhere, tell me how to get it on the train, give me a walking map. Google's rubbish at giving you good walking routes. We're working on that. They're not very good at giving you good cycle routes. You have to download something else for that. And I'm still finding the right way. You've got a bus checking app, etc. So the way that people use software, particularly if they're not from the local area, often delivery drivers aren't, that's all I think quite and hundreds of Google employees do cycle. They've got their Tottenham Court Road campus and their King's Cross campus, so it's exciting.
I remember the managing director of Google said they moved to Camden because of the cycling infrastructure. We got a nice quote of him for that. So maybe we'll have maybe I'll just do a big thank you then, Mary. That was brilliant. I thought your presentation was fantastic and was great. And there's some really sage advice on social media, which is great. So you've got a politics side and you used to dealing with all this hassle as well. So I think you can be a brilliant asset to Living Street. So thanks.
Someone wanted to know about curb height. I don't know what the issue is, Brian. Tell me about curb height.
Well, maybe we'll do a curb special. We have to deep dive. That's one of the things we have to do on this.
Sorry, Mary, that's my fault. I was just taking the mickey. On occasion, we go to a very deep level of technical detail and geekiness here.
Lovely.
That we find staggering.
We do. Yeah, don't even get me started, because there's several people in this call that could talk for the next 10 hours on curb.
Oh yeah, the chat's gone mad.
Indeed, yeah. We've got Randy himself here. We'll have to dress up and get him to speak without revealing his identity one of these weeks as well. All right, and Kate there. Okay, excellent. So I think we'll probably wind it up there if there's no other comments. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and join the campaign and join Living Streets or start your own group. Is there any final words you want to say, Mary?
No, walk with us. Talk about the fact that if walking and cycling were a pill, we'd all be on it. This is the way we tackle a very dark winter ahead. We know we've got two epidemics: obesity and loneliness, and this getting out and about, even in the dark, even in the rain, is the way to keep sane through the next 6 months.
Brilliant. Let's leave it there then. Okay, everybody, see you next week, and please come and join us anytime, Mary, and good luck with the new job.
Lovely. Thanks all. Bye, folks.
Thanks, Mary.